Now, speaking of the Sinkfield Cup, one of the great things about that event was that we had Magnus Carlsen, the #1 player in the world, coming to St. Louis and United States to play in a tournament for the very first time. He had been in the US before, but only for exhibitions and press events, things like that. This was the first time he played a major tournament in the US. As you know, he won the event. And it was his final event before he is going to be playing the World Championship match against Anand in India. That's going to start in just over 2 weeks from now. So just about 2 weeks from now, it's going to be probably the most exciting World Championship match in a long time, because you've got Viswanathan, who's been on top of the chess world for decades, and then you have just a 22-year-old who's the #1 player in the world. Pretty exciting. So I've been going over some of their games, and what interests me is that even in the games of two such elite players, you can find basic tactics and tactical themes and ideas that are relevant for class players, even players who are just starting out. I mean, you can even find mates in one sometimes, because in variations, maybe it wasn't played on the board, but you can find it in variations. And that's pretty exciting. It's a good way to get kids and people into the game, to show them that even their heroes make errors, or show them their heroes executing problems that they can find. So we're going to go over some interesting ones today. You'll notice that when you look at ChessBase, one interesting thing to do is, if you're looking in ChessBase, how many people use ChessBase for their training purposes? Raise your hand. I think a couple, or if you don't use ChessBase, maybe you use an online database of games like chess.com or GameNot. Okay, so you might not use ChessBase, but use some kind of database of major games. That's a great way to learn your openings and just to go over games. I highly recommend it, especially for your openings. You can start small. Start by, if you play a simul against a top-rated player and they play an opening you don't know, plug it into ChessBase or chess.com and look and see what the main lines are, even if it only takes you 5 to 10 minutes. Start with that, and then sooner or later you're going to be spending 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and all of a sudden you're going to be really good at your openings. So anyway, one thing that you'll notice as you get better at using these types of tools is you'll sometimes look at the event that the game is being played in and the date. A lot of times it's easy just to look at the game and not notice those details, but they're important for a couple of reasons. In this case, you'll notice that it's a Blitz game. Now, obviously that means that the quality of the game is lower, and that's probably going to explain what transpired here. So I don't want any Anand fans to be outraged at me defaming him here, because he goes on to make a bad series of moves. Of course, it's 06, so Magnus Carlsen rated a measly 2625. Of course, he's well over 2,800 now, but we should say that in 06 he was 15, 16 maybe? Yeah. It looks like that was played in March, so he would have been 15. In this position, Anand played the move. Why is my... one second, I'm just trying to get this to move. Okay, so yeah, in this position, Anand played c4. So what do we think of that move? So obviously he was taking advantage of the fact that Carlsen just played rook to b2, allowing for a potential knight fork.
You want thoughts on the move?
Yeah, try to analyze it and then raise your hand and let me know what you think of it. Yeah?
Well, it underpins the b4 knight, so could be some tactics there.
That is true, but let's try to get something a little bit more.
I was thinking about the d4 square.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's true. Let's try to calculate it all out.
Taking on c4 looks good now.
Okay, so if we take on c4, what are the two major candidate moves for black?
Oh, knight take, yeah. Terrible.
So if knight takes,
And then queen d4.
queen d4 is not quite right. Look for further candidate moves.
h6. Queen h6. Knight g5.
Exactly. Very good. So as we can see, if c4 in this position, let's take a look again. Let's take a closer look in our heads. So after takes on c4, there are two possible moves for black to recapture that pawn. Obviously, Anand's original intent in this blitz game, I'm going to keep repeating it's a blitz game, is that after knight takes, he'd be forking the queen and the rook. So that would be bad. But unfortunately, after knight takes, queen h6, why can't knight takes b2 be played? Knight g5, and that's actually a mating net. So we can take a look at that on the board. So queen h6, knight b2, knight g5, and there's no way to stop this this queen h7 idea, because if we move the rook to create some air, there's going to be a checkmate anyway on f7, or h8 for the sticklers. I always like it supposedly tells you what kind of player you are, which checkmate you prefer. Maybe the positional players like the mates that are further away. So anyway, that would be very bad. So queen takes c4 instead would also be bad because of what? Well, bad I guess is relative, because he's going to lose material no matter what at that point. Well, try to do... The problem with doing queen h6 in just a regular position, like for instance, like say you were to play queen h6, well, rook b4, queen b4, queen h6, is that actually there are some defensive resources, right? So this is a key defensive resource that you see a lot of the time in the dragon and other type of fianchetto openings, that once this queen gets in this diagonal, it's actually very good because the queen can shuttle back to defense, right? And now we're just up a million pieces.
Instead of rook b4,
Bishop f1, trying to take advantage of the queen's poor placement and overload it. I wonder about queen c5. Feels like I'm barely holding on there. Just barely holding on. It's actually a way simpler move. It's a very simple move. It's the kind of move you would actually play in a blitz game. So it's not really, it doesn't require overthinking. Yeah, just rook b1 wins, right? Because the knight can't be protected, and when it moves, this knight will hang. So I think in the game instead, Anand did play after knight. I think he did play knight c4, and then after queen h6, he just played f6, and he just loses a piece. And, you know, obviously lost the game. Even though it's a blitz game, they play very well in blitz, as those of you who have watched your local star Grandmaster Nakamura play can attest to. These guys definitely don't play. I mean, they can play like a full game that's Grandmaster level in a blitz game. It doesn't always happen, as this game evidences, but some of the games are just, you wouldn't even necessarily be able to tell that easily without deeper luck. And part of the reason is that is opening preparation. If they actually show their real opening preparation, they could be playing the first 20 moves instinctively, and then they have to think for the rest, and usually their first instinct is going to be the right move. And that's exactly the reason that chess grandmasters and masters can give simultaneous exhibitions. They're not really thinking very much, but even just their instincts is enough to beat people who are 200 or 300 points lower rated than them. So there we go. And you know, that shows a couple different tactics. It shows basically mating net, target practice, as I like to call it, on h7, and then also just pin, right? I just pin. So just the simplest tactics come up in these great Grandmaster games. Now that was a blitz game. I do have some real games for you as well. This is a wrapping game, so almost like we're getting closer to classical chess. This one also just shows that these real tactics that you look up in books still come up today among the best players in the world. So after rook takes a5, what did Magnus do here? This is kind of interesting because it shows one of my favorite topics. Because I think the best way for you to get better at tactics is just to study them in books and training programs. But there are certain concepts that are a little harder to grasp, and one of them is move order. Move order is a really important concept that is kind of inherent to most tactical studies, but isn't always explained. It's so important. When you see a tactical idea, when you see a series of captures and checks, to always reverse all the move orders and make sure that you're looking at all of them, because many, many times one of them is winning, one of them's losing, one of them's drawing. You just got to look at all of them. Bishop takes h7 check here is the correct move, which was played in the game. And then after king h7, queen b1 check is the idea. Sorry, I meant to ask you guys. And that's, of course, a double attack. So another double attack. They call it the most common tactic in chess. Usually that's especially true at the amateur level, but as we've seen in the last couple games, true at the high level a lot of the time as well. And then the elite level, rather. Usually it comes up more in variations than in the actual game. Now, after queen takes bishop, it's very convenient that we actually attack this rook here in this position, right? So that's a key point, because if the bishop on e2 captures, we can capture the rook on a6, on a5, and rook a6 would allow us to play queen b5 and protect this. Yeah?
Instead of g6, could black play queen g6?
Okay, so if queen g6 instead, now same deal, we're going to play queen b6. Are you trying to mate me or something?
Yeah,
Let's see how. That's a really good question. Okay, so I understand what you're trying to do. You're going to take on e2 first to stop knight f4 and stuff, and then after queen f5, you're going to want to play like, instead of taking my rook, you're going to play like bishop f3. Okay, so the thing is, I have a lot of moves to try to stop you, because it's going to take you 1, 2, 3 moves to checkmate me, and that's a lot of moves. Even though it looks like a good net, it's too many moves. And the interesting thing in chess is that queen is the key attacker, but the queen is also the key defender. So how to defend here most easily? Yeah? In the front?
Oh, queen to b4.
Queen to b4, it just seems like actually a crushing defense, because now if they try to creep in with queen h5 or something, we can just play what?
Queen to h4.
Yeah, queen h4 should be very good. Sorry. Rather than that move. Queen h4 is great, because now we also force the trade to queens, which is a good thing. Yeah. I mean, what else is there? I guess queen f5 is the only other option. It's probably a little better, but also it leads to a problematic move for white. What should white play here? Yeah, queen f4. That's what I wanted to do at first. Although I wonder if it's the cleanest, because you can't. I understand you can't play here now because you lose, and if you play queen h5, it transposes with queen h4. But you can't take on d5. And queen h3 is not really a threat yet because I have queen h4. It really only becomes a threat once you play g5. Right? Like once you play pawn to g5, it's a threat. No, I think.
Queen to b. No.
We could play queen b1 and then you play bishop e4.
Right.
Here's black threatening rook h8.
Is black threatening rook h8? I think threat might be a strong word, but yeah, they could play rook h8, I guess, next move. It seems maybe they're threatening g5 more than anything with the idea of queen h3. So the cleanest defense here, interesting question. I mean, we can always sacrifice and play like e4 and then f3, and that might be a decent idea if we feel like we want to just like trade off a bunch of stuff, because then at the end of it, well, I probably want to play like queen f4 or something first, so that you don't mate me, something like this. I don't really want to give up too many pawns though, because right now it's like 5 versus 4. So it's going to be, I'm going to have to basically give up my last pawn. I feel like I should have something easier here. Like maybe here just the bravest thing to do is like just try to keep all your material and just play a move like rook e1. You have to be careful because you don't want like a untimely g5 thing to happen to you. It seems like this should be okay, you know? And then our next move is going to be e4. And now queen f5. Yeah, it might be a little bit too risky, because now you're threatening to play queen h3 again. So, yeah, I might have to just go for it right away and play this e4 move and give up some material in order to stop you from doing all this bad stuff, something like that. And now we're up in exchange, so we're winning. It's always good to try to find the cleanest win, because this is not like that easy. Anyway, game didn't go like that. Instead, after bishop h7, just white won eventually, but instead, queen b1 immediately, not nearly as strong. Why?
Bishop takes knight.
Yeah, now bishop takes knight right away, and after queen takes b6, what happens now?
Rook b5.
You want to play rook b5 or rook a6, something like that, and then you're just going to take on f1 and be up in exchange.
A6 would be better,
Yeah. Another thing is you can just take on f1 because a1 is hanging in the variation. So queen a5, queen a1. So yeah, it just changes everything, the different move order. And so if you looked at queen b1 first, you didn't check bishop takes h7 first, then you would miss out on the win. So again, another example of these top players, like the guys who are going to be playing for the World Championship in just a couple weeks, really teaching through their games, even though they're rapid and blitz, teaching really basic tactics, right? Oh, this is a really interesting game. I'm actually going to go through the opening a little bit as well on this one. This is my favorite opening, the dragon defense. Anybody here play the dragon as black? It was pretty exciting to see Magnus play this. It seems like he hasn't been playing it as much lately, but he certainly essayed it a few times, and it was exciting to see. So this is the main line of the dragon. This is a Yugoslav attack. So white's planning to castle on the queen side and then try to storm with his pawns over here and try to really break open the king position. That's one of the negatives of fianchettoing, that it does give us kind of a ready-made lever to try to play h4, h5, and capture that pawn on g6. And then it's going to be a lot of ugly things happening on the h file. So that's why Bobby Fischer famously said about the dragon that it was a really bad opening for black to play. Not that it was losing by force, but that from a practical point of view, it was very dangerous because even a grandmaster could lose to an amateur because the moves for white were relatively easy to find. He called it sack, 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 mate. And we'll see some of that in this game. So again, the absolutely main line of the dragon, where white has gone to a lot of trouble to put his bishop on this diagonal, really more defensively than anything. Of course, it's nice to have the bishop develop, but one of the main points is that it doesn't allow black to do a lot of massive trades with d5. King b1 is a typical move in these types of positions. Why do you think king b1 is a good move to have in the position? There's a few different reasons, but... What's that?
Take it off the c5.
Yeah, the c1 square. I think even more than the file, it's usually even more important the diagonal. That sometimes there's kind of a check on that diagonal and some random variation. It's really what we call the grandmaster move, because it's the kind of move a grandmaster plays when it's not 100% clear whether they want to continue with g4 or h4 or bishop h6. Because it's clearly going to be useful at some point in the game. You know, black's going to be attacking on this side of the board, and we're going to prefer to have our king on b1. It's a safer square. Castling queenside, in a certain sense, is only half castling, because we only get our king to c1, whereas on b1, that's where it's really safe. Yeah?
I've had, because I've had trouble with this in the last few games with the pawn storm. What's black's best response or way to answer?
It's very scary. I mean, it's a scary, you basically just have to play really accurately. I mean, you're going to go for some kind of counterattack on this side, playing, sometimes people have played knight takes d4 instead of knight e5 and then play b5. Sometimes you play knight c4 after takes, rook takes c4, and you're getting some pressure on these squares. But honestly, it's very difficult for black to play. That's why you usually see people play it as a surprise, where they've prepared all of it and they think that they're solid against all white's attacks. And then white isn't expecting it, so they don't have their attacking methods completely chiseled. You'll see it a lot. It's very hard to continually play the dragon because white's attack is very scary. Yeah?
Yeah, does the knight sometimes come to c5 and then take on b3?
That's not as typical, and the reason is that it happens sometimes, but not that often, because really we want to get some counterplay, and by taking on b3, we don't really get our pieces into squares where we can attack that easily, and it kind of almost helps white's defensive methods a little bit by doubling the pawns. Like white can even sometimes take with the c pawn, and it's very hard for us to attack then on the c file because white will also have the c file now. So yeah, you don't see it as often as you would think because it is a kind of, it's an idea that would spring to mind. So Carlsen played this move a6. Previously the main line was just the more simple looking knight c4. And of course, white's moves again are very easy to find. h4, h5. Can anybody guess what white played here? Oh, this is actually white to move, yes. White did play g4. And this is exactly what Fisher was talking about. This move, it's not that hard to find, right? Whereas black's next move, you kind of have to wonder. Usually the secret is that white's going to have a very strong attack whether he takes. It's very hard to generalize about the dragon because it all comes down to concrete variations. That being said, white's going to have a strong attack if he takes on h5, right? And if you take on g4, white's going to have a strong attack. So you might as well get a little bit of wood for your trouble. And so black, in many of these variations, black actually does take this so-called poison pawn. And now white's move again is not particularly difficult to find. Yeah, white plays h5. So we're just basically almost like a paint by numbers attack, you know? Like for anybody who's looked at a dragon game before, this is like really the classic dragon attack. It doesn't matter that we're giving up a couple pawns because the attack is just so dangerous with kings on opposite sides, right? That's the essence of opposite side castling, that we can do all this because we don't have a king here. And let's take a look at pawn takes h5. That's not what happened in the game. Of course, Magnus took with the knight. But if pawn takes h5, the position is just so dangerous after something like bishop to h6, right? You want to try some more moves? Like somebody play a move for black. Knight g6, trying to kind of defend a little bit. The problem is it's hard to get more defenders into the game. Like, I'm trying to decide whether I should just play queen g5 immediately. Yeah, I think I want to play just queen g5 immediately. And then you play king h7. Okay, so that's good. I gained a move. And I'll probably just play here. And now after you take, knight f5 is going to be really hard to meet. It's just like almost so easy. Of course, probably those moves weren't the most accurate for black, but it's very hard for black, and meanwhile white just has all these extremely simple looking moves. Now the problem is that you can't take because, well, you can, but then it looks like we're going to win some material back. Of course, you can try things here like queen a5, so we're pinned temporarily, but I have a real hard time believing that I'm not going to find a win here. I could probably like playing knight d5 or something, just something simple.
Bishop takes f7.
Oh, bishop f7 is a really good idea. Yeah, that looks pretty strong. Oh, what happened? Okay, so anyway, a question? Okay, so yeah, it's just extremely dangerous to take with a pawn. So knight takes offers a little bit more cover, because at least if you want to break things open like that, you're going to have to give up your rook, right? Which leaves you with one less rook to attack with, which is pretty important. Because a lot of times the idea is that you like sack everything and then you play queen h2 and rook g1 mating. And if you've already given up one rook, then it's going to be a little harder to arrange all that. So Anand prefaces the pain with rook g1, getting everything into play. And now bishop to h6, again a very classic dragon attacking move. A lot of times people who are just starting to play the dragon with white play bishop h6 too early. If we play it too early in the game, there's a lot of tactics for black actually. Like there's too much piling up on d4 and we lose material. But of course here there's no pressure in the position and bishop h6 makes perfect sense. Rook takes c3, a typical dragon move to try to get some counterplay. Idea is that queen takes c3 doesn't work because this bishop would then be hanging. So he's hoping that after pawn takes c3 that black will get some counterplay. Instead, white played an in-between move here. So what other candidate moves are there besides taking on c3 with the pawn? Bishop takes g7, yes, that's certainly possible. And that is what happened. And now what do you think white did? He didn't play queen g5. He started with another move. Take a minute. Take a minute to analyze it a little bit. Because the tactics get quite messy now. Not that they weren't before.
Pawn takes d4.
He didn't play pawn takes g4, no. He did in fact play rook to h5. And now the idea is that if pawn takes h5, what terrible things are going to happen? This is a really typical dragon mating attack. Yeah, so after pawn takes h5, queen g5, notice that the knight on e5 can't even block on g6 because what? The queen on a5 is just hanging. So after pawn h5, queen g5 check. Let's try to do this in our heads. And then after king h7, white plays what? Queen takes h5, king goes back to g7. And now what? Right, we go queen g5 check again. Now the king comes back to h7, and now what? And we have the little switcheroo. Exactly, and that's the major piece attack, which is so typical in the dragon. I'll put that on the board. And that's why, I mean, that's a critical reason why it's so typical for us to checkmate in the dragon and the sacrifice, because this type of mating attack happens so frequently. Where it's just like, black didn't really do anything that horrendous, and he just got mated. That's why a lot of people have to be very, very well prepared to play the dragon. But it's a lot of fun because if your opponent starts sacrificing the pieces and he doesn't have a mate, then you can win. Yes?
Going back to the original starting position, would it have been better for black's chances to let the capture of the g6 pawn recapture with the f pawn, so you open the file at least create.
At what point? Where here?
Going back to the original with the original h pawn push, so let him push it up and let him capture at g6 and recapture with the f pawn.
Well, the problem is we've got our bishop here.
Oh.
Yeah, but some of the time people do play knight c4 and try to take on. It does happen in certain variations, so it's a legitimate question. It's just in this case, the bishop on and b3 almost seems like it's not really participating, but it does have that useful function of pinning the f pawn. So here after rook h5, Magnus found a better defensive move here. Although, just trying to pick up lots of material for the fact that and this also should be a rapid game. Chess Classic Mainz. It doesn't say it in the title, but I'm pretty sure Mainz was just a rapid event. It was like chess 960 followed by a rapid. Pretty sure. I'll check on that later, but I think this is a rapid game. I mean, Magnus thought he was going to be losing if he takes on h5. So to make things more interesting, he actually took on b3 here, allowing Anand to play queen takes a5, which Magnus's big idea here was that he would get a decent amount of material after his response here, which is, sorry, rook takes b2. Now, what's the idea behind that? Right, exactly, that if king takes b2, knight c4. Now, something that's always important to remember with sacrifices is that your opponent's not compelled to take them, right? So, of course, Anand did not play king takes b2. Instead, played king to a1. And then after takes on h5, white still can't take on b2, right? Yeah. So, black has accumulated some decent amount of material for his losses, right? What's the material count? We've got... And the problem is our king position is still not very good, though. And our pieces are a little bit scattered. So even though if we just count up the material, it's not too bad, the situation's a little bit more dire than that. Also, this queen coming to g5 and all those mating ideas still being in the position, right? So in general, the queen is a lot stronger when we have a weak king to play with, because the queen just really excels in attacking. So this is a case in point. I mean, if knight c4, we're returning to these very same variations. So your sacrifice didn't help when the two guys we needed to mate you are still alive. So exactly the same as before. The same little switcheroo. So we use the queen to remove the pawn, and then hello rook. So this game, Anand won eventually. But there was actually a faster win in this position, which is really pretty. Rook h7 would lead if you want to play rook h7 right away, and then after king h7, rook h1, king g7. And it leads to kind of the same thing with king f6, right? Except now you have a less rook. No, we don't want that. That's really messy. Obviously, one of the key questions there is really like after queen h6, king f6, queen g5, king g7, like rook h1. Like this looks really good at first glance, doesn't it? But it's kind of dangerous to go this way because now what would black try? Yeah, you got to check rook takes b2 very carefully, right? Because if rook takes b2, king b2, you have this knight c4 idea again. And at the very least, it's like even if we don't have a mate here, which we probably don't, notice that in this position, this material is like really good for black, right? Because we're only down in exchange, but we have 3 pawns, right? So that's actually better for black. We also, in this particular position, I'm not sure king b3 was the best, but in this position we also have knight d2, picking up the f3 pawn as well, right? So I mean, this is the kind of thing that dragon players dream of, right? That your opponent will go all out to checkmate you, and somehow in the end you're left with like 6 pawns. and the king coming to f6, and then the king comes to e5, and then the pawn's just kind of queen, and you feel like a great hero for rebuffing the attack and then just like getting your pawns going. But instead, it didn't actually happen in the game, but there is a really funny way to play here for white. So instead of playing rook on g to h1, white can actually just play the chill in-between move, knight takes b3. A great move, yeah. And now the queen has to move, and we can continue with our attack. Even though we're down, I mean, we're not down anything, actually. I mean, we're down exchange again, but now we have the attack. So just rook h1 is really good. And then if they try to defend with rook to g8, hoping for some salvation. I'm not even sure why I played that move. I guess I wanted to, if rook h7, I can slide into f8 or something. So now there's a really pretty way for white to finish. Rook h8 is the easy way, but there's a pretty way. Rook h8 is winning because he can't take because queen takes his mating.
So you want to go the pretty way.
Yes, queen g7. That's way prettier, right? I mean, the computer will tell you that both moves are equally strong, but the psychological devastation of queen g7 is much higher. That's why we need objectivity.
What happens after rook f8?
Queen takes f8.
Well, actually, queen takes f8 it doesn't work, does it? Because rook h8, king g7, rook h7, king f6. So now we have to go back to the prosaic. But it is kind of pretty. So that is like a pretty fun example of the dragon and how difficult it is to play. It'll be interesting to see what Carlsen cooks up for Anand. Will he play his Roy Lopez's, or will he play something different? He probably will play something different at some point in the match, because as you saw in the Sinkfield Cup, it was really full of surprises. And this match is so important. Both of them are trying to surprise each other at every turn. Okay, this one is a really important endgame lesson, which I'd like to get you guys to spend a couple minutes on before, just don't call it out right away. So this is white's move. Some of you might get this more quickly, but I want you to just look at it a little bit deeper. So yeah, study endgames, good. Have any of you heard the term tabia before? I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. Oh, Ben has. Well, usually it's actually a term that they talked about a lot when before the queen and the bishop became really powerful in the 16th century. The game was a lot slower because the queen could only move one square at a time. So it was very hard to checkmate. Can you imagine if you didn't have the queen? And even when the pawns promote, you can't make a queen. It was just much harder to checkmate. So it would the games would last many more moves. So they would start like 20 moves ahead in agreed upon openings, for instance, so that you wouldn't have to go to the trouble of actually making those first 20 to 30 moves. So sometimes people use that even today to talk about openings that are really common. And I used it in reference to endgame, which I'm not sure if that's correct, but it is very useful if you have that data bank of a few really important endgames so that you don't have to analyze them again under pressure over the board. The biggest example of that is your basic king and pawn endgames. You must have those memorized. That will save you a lot of agony if you have all of your basic king and pawn endgames memorized. And when I mean basic, I mean ones like the really, really basic ones. I don't mean you have to have hundreds memorized. And same for rook endgames. Yes?
What was the term you said again?
The Linares, Spain. When was the last year of that, Ben? That was extinct just a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, it's very recent.
Yeah. I mean,
2010. I thought they had it since then. I thought it's only been gone for a year or two. They're talking about bringing it back, but I think the government has some financial issues.
so yeah, Linares, Spain, a very historic and important tournament. If you look at the games of top players in your Davis, you'll see Linares come up again and again. Like I said before, it's great that there are tournaments like the Sinkfield Cup. So one tournament dies, another comes up. So white to move?
I feel like moving at D3.
So are you analyzing for white here?
Yeah, you said white.
Yeah, what do you want to play?
I want to play bishop D3.
There's a better move. Grandmaster's not allowed.
That's good because I don't know. I mean, I know everything. I'll just let them answer.
Bishop C2.
Bishop c2 is not right either.
Bishop C2 black's better.
Yeah, I think Ben's worried that after bishop c2, there's going to be a rook h1 check and a rook h2. Although even then, I mean, you could play like king c3. But we're not trying to wiggle out of anything here. You've got actually a very strong continuation as white, which uses some really basic endgame theory that you should study after this, because probably you don't know it.
Rook b4?
No. Rook b4, the problem is that knight takes f5.
Knight g6. And then you can't...
Knight g6 stops the pawn from mating.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of problems with it.
And we talked a lot about all the basic tactics that you can find in the games of great players, even the best in the world. We talked about how you can still find in-between moves in their games, pins, double attacks. It's all really the same stuff, just on another level, more advanced, more complications. And here, we've got another basic tactic. Guess what tactic is it?
I'm pretty sure I got it now.
Oh, but you know the tactic. The tactic is skewer.
Yeah.
So this one is an example of skewer.
Gas pawns must be pushed. As they suggest before.
All right. That's kind of slow, especially with our bishop intake.
This is an advanced class.
Ben Feingold, after sitting here for 10 minutes, he just pushes the pawn that starts with his name.
There's no F pawn.
So look for a potential skewer. Obviously, you always want to look at your forcing moves.
b4. Well, this is worse than the Cardinals being down 3-0 in the first inning.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, guys.
That's true.
Well, thanks all for joining me instead of watching the Cardinals game. Apparently, if they're down 3-0, you'd be having more fun with me anyway. So always look for forcing moves. In the middle game and opening, that means checks and captures. In the end game, of course, we should add to that aggressive pawn moves. Yes?
So push the h7 pawn. If he captures, move rook to b8. If he captures the h pawn, you skewer the king to pick up his rook.
Very good, very good. So there's some really important endgame theory around this theme as well. That when you play h7, knight takes f5, you now have this beautiful move rook b8. Just hitting this square. And now the one thing I love about this is there's a final finesse that after rook to b8, knight d4 was what Anand played. And now Carlsen, problem is that if he makes a queen here, rook takes, knight takes b3, and that's probably a draw, right? It's a draw. So instead, what does Magnus play in this position? Because b4 is a good idea, and that's along the right lines, but b4 is not that good because black can play what if we play b4? Yeah, knight c6 is a really good response because now what are you going to do? And then we're going to be able to take the b pawn anyway, and it's that same kind of situation. So instead of b4, how do you execute that same idea of protecting the pawn and maintaining your skewer threat? Yes, king b2 is winning. I love the end, the king b2 at the end. It's like this kind of more aggressive move h7 followed by the quiet move. Great move. And you still can't take on h7 because of rook b7 skewering. And now, of course, knight b3, we can just take with the king. So we're just going to be up a full exchange. And so the game went like this. And Magnus converted soon thereafter. So really nice to watch the top players in the world, and in this case, the two players playing for the World Championship in just a couple of weeks, show us basic ideas in the end game and the middle game, and shows that no matter what level you are at, you can learn lessons from the greatest players in the world, which is one of the things we love about chess.